Welcome to Ancient Geeks, a podcast from a couple of geeks of a certain age. We're looking back at geek culture from its infancy through until today. Yes, my young geeks, we are old enough to be your fathers. I'm your co-host, Stephen Taylor.
I'm your co-host, Tom Grant.
Today on Ancient Geeks, we continue our discussion of the heady early days of Star Wars with a look at The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi. So, here we are.
Here we
We
are.
did we did Star Wars last week.
We'll
We'll
round
do
out
two
the
more. We'll
original
round out the
trilogy.
trilogy.
Yeah.
Yes. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty of all that, what have you been doing this week in geek culture, Tom Grant?
Well, not a lot actually, because it's been very busy outside of the geekery. I have some other things I'm working on right now that I'm starting up doing a class next week. So just lots of prep for that. And a shout out to all my friends who have been supportive for these endeavors, both here in Denver and other folks I know in California and Oregon. So for all of you, you know who you are. Thank you so much. I think the most geeky thing I did was based on our Marvel Comics discussion. I went back and decided to watch, I sorry, not watch, read the issues of the Lee Kirby era where the Thing ran amok, which was a regular theme in the comic, as I found out, that every
Yes.
once in a while he would turn bad or someone would impersonate him or there was some sort of thing related mayhem going on, which were really good and really underscored the family dynamics and obviously the kind of the tortured nature of Ben Grimm. So that was enjoyable. How about you?
So, yeah, the main geeky thing I did actually was prepare for this episode by rewatching Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I also did finally finish my watch through the first season of Blake 7, and I look forward to talking about that to you in the future. But nothing truly new and exciting to add to the list. Watching two movies was plenty,
Yeah,
to be honest.
yeah, and they're not short. It's
No, they're not.
yeah. I think they're both over 2 hours, right?
Jedi definitely is over 2 hours, and I'm pretty sure Empire. They both,
Uh,
as we'll
like a
discuss,
little
they
bit
fit.
over, a little bit
Yeah, yeah.
over.
They're
Yeah.
they're long movies.
Okay.
So what's the music that we would like to be able to share, but aren't because we can't afford the rights?
Well, I usually do something jokey, but this
Right?
time I'll just say the Imperial March. I mean, that is
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
such an incredible piece of music.
Yes. So I took this super seriously and actually prepared because usually I forget we're going to do this, and I.
All right, so
The-
listeners, he's getting out his xylophone.
that's right. That's right. And my recorder, because I have to think. No, the Imperial Death March was the if I had to pick one, that is it is an impressive piece of music. It is evocative, and it certainly was key to that film. But I was going to throw in a couple others. One which is kind of related because that the motif from the Imperial Death March makes it. But I love the asteroid field.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
because even though the physics aren't quite correct, shall we say, in the asteroid field, the music sounds like the whirling, swirling asteroids.
Hmm.
I really I listened to the whole soundtrack while I was doing some work and the Return of the Jedi soundtrack, both of which I listened to over and over again as a kid. Um, but Williams' capacity to make motion present in the music is
Yes.
impressive.
Hmm.
He's just an impressive composer. I'm going to add in also Yoda's theme because it becomes a very important motif in the music. And then going to add one third song, or one fourth actually, which is Yub Nub, which is the original Ewok song at the end, the
Oh.
celebration that they edit out. It's not in the current version. They've got pan flutes and other things
Uh,
going on, but there it is. I will. I've already bookmarked the clip on YouTube. I will put it on the Reddit page. But it is again because I Return of the Jedi was one of the first CDs that I owned, and there is a rendition of the song that the lounge singer sings in
mm,
Jabba's, which is different in the current version. The original version was called
very different.
Loppy Necked or something like that.
Yeah,
And
we'll talk about that.
I have these songs in my head, these nonsense lyrics, and Yup Nub is definitely one that I feel
Hmm.
like exemplifies a certain kind of absurdity, and also the fact that Lucas went back and tweaked his movies, for good or for ill. So
Yeah.
those are my musical cues.
All right. Are we ready to talk about these two
Let's
movies?
talk about it. Let's talk about it. So I think we can break down the conversation into two sort of batches. I'm sure they'll overlap. One is true to the theme of the podcast. What was it like in the late 70s and early 80s when these movies were coming out? What was it like to experience that? And then we'll talk, I think, specifically about the two films. So what was it like for you between 1977 and 1980 waiting for Empire Strikes Back to come out?
Well, that was interesting because, when the first movie came out, it wasn't 100% clear there would be a sequel. I
Oh
mean, it
no.
seemed like predominantly that would be the likely outcome, but weren't sure, and really it was really hard to figure out where it was going after the first movie. The first movie is a complete movie.
Yes.
As we talked about last time, theoretically possible to imagine a timeline in which there were no sequels, and it would still be a great movie. Um, so this was about the time that I had graduated from high school, 1980. I was class of 80. And, in between, there was still a lot that was keeping Star Wars alive, because of the store my family had. There was still a lot of interest in Star Wars. There were still people who were dressing up in costume at Halloween or just to go to the grocery store. And there were still, the comics were out. There were still, other sorts of paraphernalia, the audio versions of the movie, or records that came out with the soundtrack, or kind of they were including a disco soundtrack that was as awful as you can possibly imagine.
Oh,
So there was a
disco.
lot that was keeping it alive. I mean, I did not see the Donnie and Marie special, or the Star Wars Christmas special. So that didn't pollute my perception of Star Wars at all. It was
Have
just,
you watched the Donnie Marie thing yet?
I have not watched it yet. No,
Oh, okay.
no.
You're, yeah.
Oh, I can't wait, Stephen. I'm going to be thanking you while I'm listening to that. Thank you, Stephen, for exposing me to this. What
It's something else.
So what I did see, and which really got the juices flowing, was we were at I think I'm pretty sure it was the San Diego Comic-Con, uh, a year before the movie came out, so 79. And there was a panel about the movie, and whoever was giving the panel gave like a sneak peek, and they said, well, here's what the new Imperial weapon leaves behind. And it was the footprints of the Imperial walkers from the Battle of Hoth. And of course, all you saw were the footprints. So it's like, whoa, what's that? Um, so I was pretty primed to see, to see it. I was, busy with a lot of other things in my life by then, but I was, kind of again constantly reminded by having the store and having friends who were big Star Wars fans. How about you?
So yeah, so I'm in elementary school or into early middle school at this point. I did see the Star Wars Holiday Special
Mhm.
live. For a while there, I thought maybe it was a fever dream that I'd had as a child. Um, but
Was there a call to
I,
Child Protective Services?
oh, it was just, I still remember,
Parents
like
should not allow children to see this.
I was in my parents' bedroom. We had two TVs, and I don't know what my dad must have been watching something else, so I had to watch it on the small TV, the Sony Trinitron with the rabbit
Hmm.
ears, and it was so bizarre. And then the Donnie Marie thing, yeah, I saw that because I had a tape recording of that today. It was just bizarre. But so, and I read Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and I was,
Hmm.
the novelization, the novel that was written, that was a possible movie script. As I recall, I read not that long ago that story was thought to be a low budget possible sequel to Star Wars. Um, and then it was just, that this idea this movie was coming out. I think for me, one of the interesting aspects of this, and as a kid, was this like one of the first times, maybe the first time that I could truly anticipate a new thing, a new version of this, of something that I loved, right? Because
Hmm. Yeah.
Star Trek had happened in the past. Batman, the TV show, had happened in the past. Everything that I really consumed was just Battle, the Planet of the Apes movies. They were all something from the past. New things weren't coming out. So the anticipation was substantial, and I didn't know what to anticipate. And of course, and then and then having to wait also, which is at the time a 3 year gap was it was a long time, especially for a
Right.
young child. Um, and but of course Empire, and I was trying to think because I noted in your notes you noted where you saw the film, and I can remember where I saw Jedi. I'm not quite sure where I saw Empire actually, as much as I have
Hmm.
distinct memories of seeing Star Wars, and I know I saw Empire multiple times. But it certainly was. Of course, Empire was blew me away. I thought it was fantastic as a kid,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I still do now as the ancient one that I have become, wizened and wise, no doubt. But how about you? How was your reaction to seeing it the first time?
Oh, it was amazing. And let me just rewind for a second, just to go one thing I neglected to add. Because the movie kind of generated so much talk, like how did this movie get made, and
Yeah.
what were the inspirations for it, and so forth. That was at a time also when I was seeing a lot more movies. I was a regular attendant at the Balboa Theater in Newport Beach, that ran all these very eclectic, movie runs. So they would show like three Kurosawa movies back to back, and
Hmm.
there was, so obviously, a samurai movie inspiration for the Jedi. I would see serials of Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers. I don't remember which one I saw at the Balboa, but a lot of the things that were inspiration for Star Wars, I saw
Right.
between Star Wars and Empire. But then when it finally came out, we all lined up. That was the era when you got in line for blockbuster movies,
That's right.
and waited a long time to get the tickets and get in, and it did not disappoint. I'll just say that it was stupendous.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It's a fantastic film. And of course, it has the biggest spoiler of all time. Did you get spoiled, or did you not get
Oh
spoiled?
no, nobody spoiled it. Nobody spoiled it. I was
That's
there day one, so there was no.
okay.
So unless somebody was like had a megaphone outside the theater after the first showing, there's very little risk of that happening.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I'm not sure I knew what a spoiler was at the time.
Yeah,
But
people didn't
yeah,
really do that.
no, no, no.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was definitely
it's a more
experience.
innocent time. But when those credits rolled for the second time, when you saw the slow crawl at
Oh
the
yeah.
beginning of the second movie, my heart certainly raced. That was an amazing moment.
Oh, that's true. It was absolutely a sort of little goosebumps and whatnot with the 20th Century Fox March and the
Yeah,
that brief moment before the horns blare and then the music and everything. It's just amazing.
right. Because again, it
So
wasn't clear that there would be a recreation of the magic of the first one.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's absolutely correct. It didn't feel mundane, that's for certain, right?
yeah.
I think it's fair to say it lived up to the hype, right? Which is not
Hmm.
always possible to do. And there's a lot of hype in geek culture that doesn't quite match the moment. But this did. Empire
Yeah.
absolutely did. Um, so um, what about Jedi?
How did I feel about Jedi when it first came out?
Or
So
just sort
then
of the
again,
same sort of experience. What did you,
we
was it
all,
still?
we all lined up and saw it. This time it was at the theater near Fashion Island, I'm pretty sure, in Newport Beach, and it was good, but there, as we'll talk about, there were a lot of
Mhm.
things that threw me out of the movie in a way that
Right.
didn't happen in Empire.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, Empire is just I think it's the best one of all of them, really.
Yes.
But although I'm not sure how much if you just watched Empire, it's how much of a standalone movie it is. It's a different discussion, but it is impressive.
Well, and it
Um,
stands up
so
against, whatever you want to call it, an action movie,
right,
a science fiction adventure movie, whatever.
Mhm.
It's really hard to think of anything that does it better. Like if you looked at action
Oh
movies, like, as much as I love, a movie like Die Hard, this is a way better movie in
oh
so many
yes,
ways.
yes.
Yeah.
So many. Oh no, I think when we'll talk about the movie specifically, I think we'll deal with that.
Yeah.
So at the time, did the big reveal about Darth Vader being Luke Skywalker's father. Sorry if you haven't seen the movie.
Oh no, listeners.
Uh,
That's like at this point, that's like the popular cultural equivalent of like telling somebody that the sun is a great ball of fire in the sky. You know, it's like it's just assumed.
that's right. That's right. Um, so
Yeah,
what
I
do you
was
remember having a
shocked.
reaction? Yeah, yeah.
I was shocked. I remember being shocked not just at that, but at, like we're like 75% through the movie. It's like things are going really badly here. Like,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
they were
like
going pretty badly.
this is not unless there's a miracle, this is not going to end well. And then of course, that was the ultimate gut punch, the
Yeah, yeah,
revelation.
yeah. That was no, it was absolutely a total shock. I had no inkling. And it was just, it did feel like this monumentous revelation, right? Just
Yeah.
monumental.
And that is a hard thing to pull off.
It is. It is a hard thing to pull off.
Because there's been so much since then about the lineage of the Skywalker family,
Oh yeah.
without getting into later Star Wars too much here, but that makes those sorts of connections between characters seem trite, and and this it did not feel like a hackneyed cliche. It was just
No,
like,
it did not.
whoa, I did not expect that.
No, I think that's
Mhm.
right. Now, to somewhat get ahead of myself because I have some thoughts about this later, but I do think, but this took me how many years to get to this revelation? I mean, in some ways, it is just almost this serial logic that Lucas was going on, which is like what it's a big reveal thing that we can do that's really shocking
Right,
without
right.
necessarily thinking it through entirely, which we'll get to. But really, for at the time, it was just a hugely dramatic, very impressive. Oh my gosh, what a twist kind of thing, and it was truly a surprise.
Yeah.
You're right, it's something difficult to pull off these days.
Yeah, and again, I just want to underline, I think it was a real brave step to make the end of the movie such a downer, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I think the kind of the temptation for a lot of writers would be to have at least something good,
Right.
that came out at the end, and no, not this one. It was all pretty bad.
We're losing hands. We're losing hot hands.
Ha ha
Sorry.
ha ha ha.
Yeah, I didn't plan that joke. If I had, that'd be pretty sad. Anyway, okay. So I was trying to think like what's different, right? So we get different locations. Although, boy, this is the universe. This galaxy is full of mono cultural, mono
Yeah,
climatic.
terrain. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a word that I can't find right now, but
Mhm.
at least we went from. I was envisioning like, was this pitch meeting? Well, we had a desert planet in the last movie. We need an
Right.
ice planet in this movie.
And then a jungle planet
We had a jungle
or a
planet.
swamp planet,
Yeah,
whatever.
swamp planet, and then we get the
Yeah.
Cloud City. But what did you think about the locations in this film?
Oh, they were great. Everything felt fresh,
That's
and
true.
you, although it did, I can remember thinking like, okay, my nerd brain was, also like I was an astronomy kid. Like, yeah, do they have no other types of geography on these planets? It's like, but I was willing to swallow that, and think, man, they did such an incredible job on just filming in harsh conditions
Yes,
for Hoth. I mean, that I remember thinking like that must not have been easy. And then the swamp was so well done, so
it
well
was.
done. It was alive. There were
Yes,
critters moving around. It just was great. It blew me away. And the Cloud City was gorgeous.
it was. It was. No, I mean, from a movie making point of view in particular, and this is true, which I mean, when I was a kid, I don't think I thought about it. I thought about it later, but think about they went on location to film these things, right? They're in the
Yeah,
deserts. In the first movie, they're in these very harsh snow conditions. In the second movie, and then a lot of it's on sound stages too, but it's very impressive, and they did a good job of capturing the terrain and what have you.
yeah. I'm
But
swallowing my rant against CGI until the end.
okay,
But
we'll
but
get
there
to
will
that.
be one. Just be warned.
Oh no, I think we're going to bring maybe our I keep thinking we should have a segment called Grumpy Geeks. And this may be coming.
That's
Uh,
that's for our non-existent Patreon listeners,
that's right.
our
That's right.
special episodes of grumpiness.
So there, I was trying to think. So I was trying to pay attention really, and it really kind of struck me. There are some new characters, but they're not that many new characters,
Mm-mm.
and the supporting characters are often very cardboard. We get Lando Calrissian, he's new. Boba Fett, he's new.
Yeah,
Um, but that's kind of it, really, except for an assortment of Imperials who get force choked,
right.
and an occasional background person commanding the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah.
What did you think of the new characters at the time? How did Lando strike you?
Oh, I thought he was great. To have an ambiguous character like that, like you know something's not quite right there, but you could kind of believe that, he was going to be okay at the end. Be part of the good guys.
Yes,
Yeah, Boba Fett. It still stuns me to this day that Boba Fett became such a big deal.
he was just a
Uh,
big deal.
yeah, because at the time it was just here's this bounty hunter. He happened to be the one smart or lucky enough to follow them. Okay. He doesn't really have anything to say, a couple of things to do, but it wasn't really that much of the movie around him.
No, he wasn't. I mean, again, I mean, you've seen the Christmas specials, haven't you? At this point,
Yes, I've seen the
yeah.
Christmas special, not the
I
Donnie and Marie
mean,
special.
the Christmas because that's where you get. We talked about it before. He's in the Christmas special. He's a cartoon character. I don't, but yeah, I don't know why he became. I mean, his armor is kind of cool. That's as far as it goes.
Hmm.
He really doesn't do all that much, except for,
Yeah,
he's someone smart to figure out the whole the floating with the garbage scheme that Han has.
right.
Otherwise, he mostly just stands around,
Hmm.
and he's actually not too effective in Return of the Jedi, to be honest.
No, I
They
mean
should have been enough to kill the character, but they
the
didn't.
best new character was Yoda. I
Okay, yes,
yeah, I just, as the sensei, figure there, with his sort of comical introduction, like who is this
yes,
guy,
yes,
to finally being somebody who had profound insights into what being a Jedi was about. It wasn't about power. It was about a certain kind of, internal discipline or ethos or whatever. That he was terrific.
yes.
And he
And
was a
Yoda,
Muppet. They did
and
it
he was
all
a
with a
Muppet.
Muppet. That's
It was
amazing.
Frank. It was Frank Oz. It was
Yeah.
Grover.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So Yoda is really important. I remember, and Yoda was a good fake out, especially as a kid, because
Yeah.
the archetype was, oh, he must be the servant of the little green guy must be a servant of Yoda the master, and
Right.
then the fact that he ended up being the master was a good switcheroo. Um, so at what point, again, in the sort of early stages, did it really become clear to you, or that it was going to be a franchise, that it was this thing beyond just a movie or two?
Um, a franchise. Well, I didn't expect it to go beyond the three movies.
Right.
And I didn't need it to.
Hmm.
But in terms of there being more material coming out, I remember at the time, it, again, it wasn't clear that that was the inevitable direction. I mean, of course, there would be all the sheets and comforters with images for children's beds,
Sure.
the
Sure.
Battle of Endor or whatever. But I didn't expect that there would be more fiction necessarily. I mean, so no, I mean, and that was one of the things that was great about the movies was they had a complete story to tell, and they told it, and they wrapped it up, and finding out about all the different characters and the kind of aliens there were in Jabba's palace or something like that. Yeah, it did, that it wasn't something I even imagined, and if it had appeared earlier, it's not something I would have necessarily consumed madly.
Right. So I mean, it becomes truly a franchise later, but I mean, obviously at the time between the three movies, all the toys and all the merch and all this stuff, the comics and then of course the novelizations that come out and all that sort of thing, and even like a handful of other things like the two Ewok TV movies. I think only one of which I saw maybe,
Yeah,
and
when did the
some other.
Droids cartoon come out?
That wasn't that. It was in the same time period, maybe a little. I don't remember ever watching it, so maybe it was just beyond when I would have been watching Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
none of that.
but I mean, there was this sort of background stuff. I remember there being rumors, even I don't know when I first heard them, but it would have been during this time frame that oh, Lucas has a plan for 12 movies and there's a prequels
Yeah, yeah, I heard that.
but you know, it was kind of interesting, really, in retrospect, perhaps more than at the time, that there really wasn't. In some ways, it's shocking from a modern perspective or contemporary perspective, I should say, that they didn't immediately make more movies, right? That somehow
Right.
it took 16 years to get the next movie, which is remarkable because right now, if something makes that much money, we're going to make another one like
Right.
immediately.
Right.
We're going to take The Hobbit and make three movies instead of like one or maybe two. We're gonna do a whole bunch of stuff and make as much as we can while we can while we can print the money. So in some ways, it always was sort of interesting to me that it didn't go any further. Um, and of course, now it's become this. There have been how many movies now? There've been, well, more than the nine. There are 9, 10, 11 movies now, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a couple of TV shows and whatnot. But
And it's funny because I'm realizing so much of the other culture that I had been consuming at the time, like comics, or science fiction or fantasy. Yeah, I don't want to call them properties because that diminishes them. But anyway, series, where you had a
mhm,
recurring character or set of characters, were serialized kind of stories that didn't necessarily have an endpoint, or
right,
they had a very distant one. But it might have been, just because I was so much more into watching movies, that kind of, again, didn't expect that there needed to be another step beyond where the first three movies went. Like it's like watching Casablanca. I don't need to know,
right.
where Humphrey Bogart and Claude Rains are going and doing after the end of that movie. Don't need it.
Yeah, Casablanca 2, more Paris for you. I don't know, but anyway, yeah, 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 yeah. No, actually, you raise a good point, and that is,
Yeah.
especially at the time, right? Movies were
Mhm.
considered finite.
Right.
We talked a little bit about this last time, and often sequels meant the diminution of the property, right? It was just a money grab.
Yeah.
Spaceballs 2, the Back
Yes.
for More Cash or whatever it's supposed to be called. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, the idea that you would have a movie franchise like you currently have with, say, the Marvel properties or, all the Fast and Furious movies or whatever the case may be. I mean, the only
Yeah.
franchise that I can think of, and at the time that there was an anticipation there would be more, was James Bond.
Right.
And of course, those movies were all self-contained stories,
Right.
and because you could change your James Bonds, and you could not totally acknowledge the previous movies. Sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't.
Though they
It
never
wasn't
had a
quite.
regeneration scene in the
No,
James Bond movies like in Doctor Who.
yeah, yeah. This those Brits, I tell you
Yeah.
what, changing up actors and things. What are they thinking?
No, there
Um,
was actually, though, we're on the subject. This is a totally
sure,
useless sidebar, but I'll do it anyway. So
we're
like
geeks. Go
the
for it.
like the original Casino Royale movie, the one with David
Yes,
Niven and
yes,
Woody Allen, they actually did say that there were more than one James
that's right.
Bonds out
That's
there.
right. That's right. So let's dive into these films, right?
Okay, let's do. I can't wait, especially about
So
Empire.
Empire, yeah. I mean, Empire. So I'll go ahead and lay these cards on the table. My original goal was to kind of maybe just fast forward through these movies and just remind myself of some things. And when
Okay.
watching Empire, I'm like, there was no place where I wanted to pick up the remote and zap through it.
Oh no, I got sucked in
It's
totally.
a very well-paced movie. And there's a couple of maybe at the very there's some of the Hoth stuff that maybe you could shave a few minutes off of, but it really is a very enjoyable film, and it really drew me in, and I've seen it many, many, many times. Um, Jedi, it reminded me why it's not in the top of my list. I think, in fact, I like Rogue One better than Jedi. I think I like The Force Awakens, not The Force Awakens. the middle one that I'm blanking around now. The what's
Mandalorian.
no, no, I like the Mandalorian better too. No, the middle of
Yeah.
the new trilogy,
Oh, oh,
um,
oh, yeah.
The Last Jedi.
Right.
Um, but anyway, although I like it fine, but there are times when I did fast forward, and we'll talk about what those are. And
Okay.
there are things that I'm like, all right, but Empire. Let's talk about Empire. I mean,
Yeah.
it
So,
is from the. Go ahead. No,
I was
please.
going to say just from it got going immediately.
Yes.
It was like 2 minutes into the movie and Luke is in trouble.
Yes.
Right. And it was also no stopping for a bunch of exposition. It was just kind of like you know that they're on Hoth. This is where the rebel base is. It's established that the Empire is looking for them and is likely to find them. That it were those original scenes were headed someplace really fast. Also, the little touches like Leia looking at Han,
Hmm.
sort of, an interesting look that she gave him. Like it made you question, like, oh, is there something
Right.
emotionally going on there that didn't exist in the first movie? Anyway, it didn't stop at all, and it was so well done. It didn't need to, right? I think in the hands of lesser people, there would have been a lot of talking.
Sure.
And a lot of like tours of the rebel base and so forth that you didn't need.
That's right. No, you get a sense of all of that without any exposition whatsoever. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of in dialogue. You get maybe some setup of certain things or some
Hmm.
context. I was struck from the beginning, as in all these movies, but the music is just so so omnipresent, but in a way that
Yes.
is enhances the film. The sound design just continued, just struck me as how great it is, right? Just this,
Hmm.
the way everything sounds and the sets were, and the one that got me most was the base at Hoth, the interior set when
Right.
Han is walking through after he's been out patrolling. It clearly is a large, massive space,
Hmm.
right? Chewbacca's working on an actual, his partial model of the Millennium Falcon. You're walking around and it just has this
Right.
scope to it. Now, and I know some of that stuff, although I don't know in that scene. I know in other parts it's clearly matte paintings, um, and other kinds of visual tricks. But it just really struck me. The film itself feels very polished. Isn't quite the word that I want, but it looks just superior. It just looks fantastic. Everything
Yeah.
about it, well constructed, well done, well shot, well framed. The color, everything is just fantastic. It feels like, to me at least, like it, I feel like you can see the money and the success from the first movie reflected in the way they were able to put together the second movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and I would say not just the money, the thoughtfulness.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I mean, so I think that, we're kind of circling around the V word, verisimilitude, that you invest what you have into making something seem plausible
Yes.
and, and evoke whatever the feeling is, like, damn, it must be cold there. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
uh, everything in the Rebel base looked functional.
It did.
Which you'd expect, the ragtag band of rebels, on an ice planet. The Imperial Star Destroyer, the Super Star Destroyer bridge
Yes.
with everyone in the pit,
Yes.
that was a
Yes.
really interesting idea to do that. And just all the, the different boards that people were looking at,
Hmm.
whenever there was like a handheld device of some sort, like Luke's binoculars, it had
Hmm.
sort of a kind of combination retro functional feel with a little bit of a modern touch to it to make it
Yes.
seem Star Wars-ish. Just again, incredible thoughtfulness. Things that they didn't need to do. Like they didn't need for Dagobah to have a snake on the branch kind of
That's right.
slowly curling around it, which again is not a CGI snake. It's a real critter there,
No.
or other things that the touches that they threw in like that were just absolutely fantastic. I mean, just so much thought and care went into that.
No, lots of detail, a lot of hard work, a lot of eye for the specifics.
Yeah. And again, I think both this and the first movie at the time, I really felt like whoever this George Lucas guy is, he knows how to work with good people who do sketches, storyboard
Right.
sketches, or designing what the sets will look like, and then the people who carry these things out, and then the people who do the models, who design them, and then do the industrial light and magic execution of those special effects. Like it wasn't just him, and I think probably the first time I saw Empire, I really thought it was George Lucas's movie from a direction standpoint. And then I think it may have been like the second time I saw, it's like, oh, who's this Kirshner guy?
Right. Right. Right.
Who's
Right.
Lawrence Kasdan? I didn't know who Lee Brackett was, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah. Yeah.
co-wrote the script. They wrote different phases of the script, I should say. But it's like, yeah, okay. It was a lot of awareness around the first movie when it came out, especially given the comic book store, that there were all these people who contributed to it. But you really saw it also in the second one as a
Oh,
collaborative effort.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh no, but just the ILM stuff. Oh, there were plenty of reports at the time, and no one, and one can look into it now if one wishes. But just all the individuals who were working on the models and again the props and all these things.
Hmm.
It's just incredibly detailed work and very impressive. It had a scope and a scale to it that that many previous movies didn't have. That
Yeah.
much is certain. Um, so just some general, no pun intended, observations, because I think one of the first things I noticed was the general in charge of the base, which I'd never noticed before, is the Waldorf salad guy from Faulty Towers, the guy
I
that wants
saw
the
I
Waldorf salad.
Yes, exactly. He was the cranky American tourist
Yes, yes, he
complaining that
was.
Basil Fawlty didn't know how to make a Waldorf salad. I had the
That
same
was
exact thought. It's fun. Like there's a lot of those actors who were
yes,
in British TV,
yes.
including Doctor Who. Like I recognized,
No, oh
like
yeah,
like watching it again, oh,
yeah.
that guy was in this episode of the fourth
Ad,
Doctor era.
Admiral Ozzel was in Pyramids of Mars that we discussed a couple of
Yeah,
weeks ago.
yeah, yeah.
And of course, Cliff Clavin is in the Rebel Alliance.
Right, I know.
He's an extra in the. It's hilarious. So yeah, I mean, and in fact, also General Veers was also the guy that was in the AT-AT. He was in several
Yeah.
Doctor Who episodes. So yeah, I
Julian
would. I'm
Glover, who was in
that's the one.
5 Million Years to Earth. I think I've got the title right, which is a great,
Uh,
great little known movie.
that one I don't. I not little known to me because I don't think I've heard of it.
Yeah,
But good to
okay.
know.
It was one of the Quatermass movies.
Okay.
All right.
So
Deep cut
um,
there. I, I,
yeah,
I
deep
brought the
cut.
conversation to a standstill with my
One thing that I would
nerdity
say,
there.
and I've seen the movie enough to mostly recognize, even when they've inserted stuff.
Hmm.
I don't think you ever needed to see the Wampa. I think it worked better when it was just his arm.
Yeah, yeah,
Not that that makes some difference. Um, so speaking of the thing you mentioned before about the AT-ATs, the Imperial Walkers, they are super cool and they are super dumb.
yes, yes. They are. I remember at the time thinking when the snow speeders were
Yes,
tripping them up, it's like,
yes.
that's a really obvious design flaw.
Yes, yes.
I,
It was
I I
a
can't defend that.
it was a fantastic coincidence that the speeders happened to have harpoons on them,
I
though.
know, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, so
Because
what we could say is like maybe like since the Empire didn't really have any enemies, it'd been a long time since anybody really challenged them until the rebellion. I don't know. As I said, it's a hard one to defend.
no, no, they are. I mean, they're scary looking. They make the sounds are speak to the sound design.
Hmm.
Um, it's
Yeah.
great, but holy cow, what a weird concept.
Yeah, I didn't agree with you enough about the sound design. That really hit me with the rewatch I did. Was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
the
Oh
little
no, it's
noises when doors would
yes,
open or
yes,
anything. It was just
yes.
fantastic.
I still remember again. It was like a 60 Minutes or some one of those types of shows doing a story about Star Wars and about the sound of the when the walkers walk.
Yeah.
It's like it's a machine that cut metal, and they had taken and recorded this.
Oh.
It was just like it's stuck in my head from a long time ago. Um, uh, I
So can we
didn't.
can I throw in something about the asteroid field
Let
since we're
me say
talking about
let's
Oh,
go to the
okay, we're
asteroid
not there
field. Let me
yet.
say
Oh, I'm
one
sorry, I'm
thing.
skipping ahead.
No,
My
no, no,
bad.
that's fine. I was just going to say one other thing. There was because it was a kind of a repeat scene from the first movie, but there is something super ominous about Darth Vader walking down a corridor.
Yeah.
This just anyway.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, let's talk about the asteroid field, which I love that sequence. But what would you like
That's
to
not
say
how
about it?
asteroids work.
No, it's not.
Asteroids are spread out across millions of miles, but even though I knew that at the time, again being an astronomy kid, it was still fun. It was still
I
fun.
know, it's a great scene.
Yeah,
And I the whole swashbuckling Han Solo stuff, and then accidentally parking inside the belly of a beast.
right.
Good
Yeah,
stuff. I love the bit where he figures it out. It's like we got to get out of here. I'm like what? What are you
yeah,
talking about?
yeah. No talking. We just leave now.
We
Right.
just leave now.
But as kind of in a way preposterous as the space worm was, it was again just like they kept throwing things into this
Yes.
story that were at the time just like mind-blowingly
Yes.
new. At least for movies, right? You might have seen something like that in a science fiction book or in a comic book or whatever, but for movies, it was just like one cool idea after another.
Yes.
It
You want
was
to talk about Yoda?
unrestrained. Yeah, Yoda.
Yeah.
Well, what have we not said
We
about
are,
Yoda?
we did say Yoda. I think. Well, tell you what, we've already sort of hit the basic Yoda things. I have some things to say about the Force. We can say them later. Um, how about Cloud City? The
Yeah,
Darth Vader scene behind the door is still it's a classic scene.
right. Yeah, even when you know it's going to happen,
Yes.
it still works.
Yes.
That's the whole thing about this movie is like, although I have it etched on my brain, I remember
Right.
practically everything about it without having to watch it again. It's been maybe 30 years since I saw it last.
Oh, really?
It's still exciting.
I saw, when my kids were younger, although still they're in their mid to late 20s now, so it's been a while. But I did at least revisit many of these movies when they were kids, so a little more recently than that. But yeah, it's been I don't know when I last sat through Empire, the entire thing. It's probably been 15 years. And yeah, but you're right. It all the stuff works. All the stuff that even though you know it's going to happen, it works.
Right.
And
Well, Cloud City, I think, kind of continued something, a technique that the Star Wars movies did, um, which was to suggest a lot
mhm,
about the way the galaxy worked without
right,
saying too much. With saying, "Oh
that's right.
well, we have this facility, and we don't always get all the supplies we need, and then we have this kind of arm's length relationship with the Empire and so forth." And it was just like 30 seconds of dialogue, and that's all you needed.
That's
To
true.
then set up that, well, Lando was in this somewhat vulnerable position, might have, in normal times been able to steer clear of Imperial entanglements, but that ended abruptly. And it was just, again, such a nice touch. And it just seemed like this could actually be a place where they parked
Yes.
this levitated city in the clouds of a gas giant.
Yes. Although I will say, it always looks great and it works in its own way, but boy, the architecture of the Star Wars universe is insane. There's always
Yeah.
these gantries and these long shafts and people it's just
Sliding around in the
sliding around and like
yeah.
what are these tubes for? And anyway, um
Cloud City is a series of tubes.
exactly. That for some reason have trapdoors in them. That
Yeah.
was the lightsaber duel was fantastic. That may be the best
Yeah.
lightsaber duel in all of Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think it is easily. Yeah. Watching it
Um,
again, I definitely felt that. It wasn't just because of the choreography of it. It's because of the
yeah,
stakes.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The I love it's a very famous scene. It's often a still, but it strikes me every time I see it. And it struck me when I watched the movie when Luke first confronts Vader. Even though Mark Hamill is considerably shorter than Dave Prowse, the
Yeah.
way the shot is framed, Luke is taller than Vader in perspective.
Yeah.
And later, Vader is towering over Luke when he's winning. It's an interesting sort of visual structure, I thought. And it was anyway, it was just I thought it was a very impressive uh, sequence.
Yeah. So
The
another thing about, since we're talking about that part of the movie, I did feel at the time, and I still don't, that they that the relationship between Han and Leia was too rushed. It was certainly rushed, right? But it
yes.
wasn't like when he's about to be frozen into carbonite and they have that famous last exchange, I
Hmm.
love you, I know.
Hmm.
That, you still didn't feel moved by that moment.
Hmm.
Yeah, there was enough there, that of a relationship that you kind of wanted to see happen. That moment of loss, kind of hit home.
Oh, I totally
Yeah.
agree. I totally agree. And they did more than sufficient job between the scenes in Hoth, the scenes in the asteroid field, and the scenes in Cloud
Yeah.
City. So I think the payoff was it was a good payoff, and
Yeah,
it
because there's
was
a lot
believable.
there are a lot of movies, especially old movies, where like people will fall in love in 10 minutes.
Right.
And it often doesn't ring, very, very credibly. This worked,
No, absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I will say there is the directing in general, I think was quite good. There's a variety of
Yes.
small touches. There's even with these um, like Chewbacca in the cockpit in the
Hmm.
asteroid, giving certain looks to Han about what's going on, or even the interaction with them when they're putting the Millennium Falcon back together. But
Right.
there's some fantastic. One of my favorite little scenes is after Vader has yet again altered the deal,
Hmm.
and Lando gives his little robot friend the side eye, and it
Yeah.
just communicates so much.
Yes.
And it's just so well done, and all that transpires from there. I mean, now I will admit, after having watched it a gajillion times, there is a certain degree to which Lando's sort of flip real quick, and we're going to treat him like a good guy now. Seems a bit abrupt, but
That
that's okay.
does. Yeah, that didn't work totally, but it was okay.
I was reminded that, and I love Mark Hamill, but his acting in that scene where he, you know, gets his hand cut off is a little hard to
Yeah, there
deal
are other
with.
moments. There are some definite whiny Luke
Yes,
moments.
yes,
And it's funny because I was still impressed at how good Harrison Ford was
yes,
rewatching it, and I was at the
yes.
time. I mean, he gets the great lines. He's just so natural in the role. Um, it kind of helped balance off the Luke parts, because the Luke
Yes.
parts, I mean, they're still pretty good.
Yeah.
His grappling with, well, what is the Force, and
Yes.
what do I need to do and not do, and so forth. That sort of conflict was still good, but he was a much weaker actor, and having the ability to kind of cut between him and Han and Leia really, I think, was one of the reasons that the movie did kind of keep going so successfully
No,
without
there.
losing you.
I guess I put it this way, which is, I suppose, the hallmark of good acting, and recognizing, of course, that I'm fully aware they're all actors, but um, Harrison Ford makes me feel like he's Han Solo,
Yes.
and Mark Hamill on occasion makes me feel like he's Mark Hamill acting like Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, you said it very pithily there.
And there's a scene in Jedi when after Luke has told Leia to skip ahead, but we're about to go to the movie anyway. This whole scene on Endor, and it just what struck me there, where Luke tells Leia that he's their siblings, and the whole thing about Darth Vader, and then Han walks in and thinks there's something going on,
Hmm.
and it's kind of a clumsy scene, to be honest. But the acting, Harrison Ford still feels like that's Han Solo, and again, the other two are just not quite at that level.
Right.
It just doesn't. It just struck me. At any rate,
Yeah.
so
So
anything else
I
about Empire in general?
so I want to ask you, what did you think of C-3PO when you were a kid watching this movie?
Um, I I thought he was comic relief.
Yeah.
I thought that he was uh, I was struck to them as they ignored him when they shouldn't have and paid too much attention at other times, I suppose. But
Yeah,
he was just comic relief as far as I was concerned. He and R2D2 both, and C3PO was supposed to be the nervous Nelly. What was
right.
your what inspires you to ask the question?
Well, I remember when we watched it for the first time, in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon when Leia
Yes,
shuts him off. Yeah,
yes,
I actually like, yeah. I think I cheered a little bit. It's just like enough of this guy who's constantly all on Twitter. Oh, Master
yes,
Luke.
yes, yes,
Anyway,
yes. Yes, yes.
that was something else I think that even at the time was little overdone.
Yeah, I think with each movie, they made him a little more frantic.
Yes.
And I still find it not the this is a whole nother conversation for another day. But if I had to make a list of some of the most absurd things in the entire franchise, the fact that
Yeah.
baby Darth Vader actually made C3PO is amongst the most ridiculous of them all.
I I I I definitely remember seeing that in the theaters and saying aloud, "Oh, come on."
Yeah, it's
All
something
right.
else. Anyway,
That was the only other
let's
thing I had for Empire.
let's talk about the Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
Um,
let's talk about
so
it.
well, I'll what you want to start? What are you where do you want to start talking about this movie?
Well, if we're going to go through it, I would say it didn't start as well as the previous movie did. I mean,
I
as I
agree.
said before, the first movie started out bang, Luke's in trouble, he's in a cave, there's a monster that's going to eat him, Han is out there trying to find him and is at the risk of his own life. This was not as fun starting out, and it was very cartoony in a way I
Yes.
felt at the time, and watching it again really reminded me of that feeling.
It I mean, on one level, I suppose, right, there's this obvious danger to Han and they're trying to save him. Although, I mean, I guess but the stakes in that sense are actually kind of low, relatively speaking. The stakes in Empire is the rebellion may be crushed here and now because the Empire has found their
Right.
hidey hole.
Yeah.
This is really about one guy, which he's an important guy. We love the guy, but
Yeah.
it's just one guy. And it in some ways almost seems absurd that it took that much convoluted planning to rescue the one guy from a gangster. And I found over the years as I've rewatched this film again, it's been a while, but in watching it again now, it just that part over a time it kind of drags. It's like I wrote it down at some point. It's like 48
Hmm.
minutes or something by the
Yeah,
time you
it's
maybe it's not
long.
and and while there is this, the big hero turn when they rescue, when Luke finally, gets his lightsaber. But again, I'm watching it, I'm thinking, look, I kind of understand from the movie point of view, this is all kind of all clever and whatnot, but this plan should not have worked. There's so many moving pieces for this plan to
Right.
work the way it's supposed to work. Um, that I just, yeah, it's a bit much.
Yeah, and the first part of Empire connected to the rest of Empire. Right?
Yeah.
What happened there was consequential for, where Luke went, where the
Yes.
other
Yes.
characters went and so
Yes.
forth. It was connected to the rest of the movie. Since we knew in our hearts that they would rescue Han and everybody would be fine. Spending however long it was, in Jabba's palace, then, was a delay of the rest of the movie.
That's well put. That's very well put. I think that's what it is about it dragging that kind of gets to me. It is, I mean, all of Star Wars movies to some degree or the other are each a collection of set pieces, but this one in
Mhm.
particular, this movie feels like, okay, we got the Jabba part, then we got the brief Dagobah interlude, and then we got the indoor thing, and then we got Luke and Darth and the Emperor, and it's like these pieces, and it feels in some ways less of a complete movie in that sense. It just feels like a series of
Yeah.
episodes that have to be fulfilled. And I enjoy the movie fine, and I like seeing these characters. Um, so I don't want to make it sound like I hate the movie, but it just really, I've always had some problems with this movie, and this viewing didn't make that a whole lot better, to be honest.
Yeah, and it was
Um,
it took again, it took me out of the movie quickly, and something that really took me out of the movie was the slave Leia costume, as we now call it. I was embarrassed at the time by it.
mm,
You know, it was a sort of a callback to like Frank Frazetta, like
right, right.
kind of almost clothing design, I want to call it. Yeah, I just remember at the time being really feeling like it was really cringy.
Yeah, it's the whole, all of it's cringy. Even like the Boba Fett stuff, and it becomes all slapstick.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like this is the fierce guy that captured Han Solo, and you accidentally hit him with a stick, and he falls into the pit.
Right.
It was just, I don't know. It just seemed a bit um,
Yeah, I mean the
problematic.
special effects were great. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
all the costumes and makeup and for
Oh,
all the aliens in
absolutely.
Jabba's palace were great. But it didn't add up for me at the
No,
time.
I think part of it is the stakes issues. Like again, we're supposed to be fighting a war against an intergalactic empire that's evil and dominates this
Yeah.
totalitarian force, and we've got a side trip to deal with a gangster. He's just a gangster. Why is he so powerful? I don't, what's the big deal?
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
It's um so so let's talk about oh I actually I'll say this about the movie and we'll come back to it, but I think even at the time I felt like what we're doing the Death Star again? We already did the Death Star. We can't do
Yeah.
something. We only have three movies, and
Hmm.
two of the movies have to revolve around a plot device of destroying the Death Star. And then in fact, and just to round this out, which may be just Lucas's lack of imagination, in Phantom Menace they have to blow up a thing in orbit to save the
Right.
day, and then
Hmm.
in The Force Awakens, which is not Lucas's fault, but they're having to blow up a planet killer. It's like, can we not think of something else to do
Yeah.
than blow something up at the end? Anyway,
Well, I wasn't that bothered by it. It was, it did feel like a retread of
yeah.
the idea of the first movie, but no, it didn't bother me so much to kind of stretch logic a little bit to the point where I could say to myself, well, they built one, maybe they could
Sure.
build another one. It seemed like a gigantic undertaking to do it. It wasn't
Apparently,
something
yes.
that you did, trivially, but that was okay. The other thing, that didn't work for me and it really struck home rewatching it, was just the way that it started, with the Empire in Return of the Jedi. Like the first scene is, Vader harassing the guy in charge of
Hmm.
building the new Death Star about some aspect of its production. You're using the wrong subcontractors. Your material costs have gone up too high. It was, like again, kind of like get on with it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, it just seemed, it all seemed a bit contrived, to be honest. But I mean, that's all right. But let's talk about the Yoda scene.
Yeah.
So I remember at the time, and every time I subsequently watch it, this feeling grows, which is the scene when Luke goes back to Yoda is discordant with all that happened in Empire. Empire was
Yes.
you can't leave, you haven't finished your training, do not face Darth Vader. Now it's like, oh, your training is done, except you just have to face Darth Vader again. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Um, and what struck me, and there's a couple of things in that sequence, and this is deep geek territory now because I'm gonna like be frustrated about the internal logic of Star Wars. But, you know, and this becomes the central problem I think I have with a whole lot of Star Wars is Lucas couldn't figure out his own lore about the Force and Jedi,
Hmm.
right? In any kind of way to make, and
Yes.
I don't need it to make, I don't need it to make like perfect mathematical sense. Don't get me wrong. It can be mysterious and it can be unexplained, and maybe it should have been more mysterious and more unexplained. But you should have at least some kind of consistent rules, not well, just at least a consistent structure, which is on the one hand, a Jedi supposed to be passive and you shouldn't use the Force for attack, but oh, go kill Darth Vader. This doesn't make sense to me. And the whole idea that the light side and the dark side are not not one's not
Mhm.
more powerful than the other when it's so manifestly obvious from all the narrative that the dark side is way more powerful than the light side, at least any manifestation that we see.
Right.
And of course, they make a variety of mistakes. Like if in fact it's true, which I think is sort of an interesting concept from Empire, that size matters not, and that he can move a rock or he can move a X-wing fighter. Well, if you can use the Force to do those things, why can't you use like why is he dragging Darth Vader's body through the Death Star if you can move rocks around with your brain? They could never be decide when these powers should be used or not used.
Yeah.
But really the whole thing about the Force running strong in families, like George did not remember that when you wrote the prequels, because in the prequels they're not allowed to have kids. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I know, it's just a movie, Stephen. What are you complaining about? But um, you remember yourself as just a show. You should really just
Well,
relax. I know that's, but still,
but if they're asking us to buy into it, and
yes,
they are again investing a lot into, the believability of it to whatever that meaning, what that means in terms of a movie like the Star Wars trilogies. Um, when you start violating that, it's bad,
yes,
right? It's not like you
yes,
feel personally offended, it's just like, well, then nothing matters. Then
right.
you're asking me to engage with this movie, but then you pull the rug out from under me.
Yeah, because the whole notion of him going to fight Vader in the first place was it was going to tempt him to the dark side, which made perfect
Right.
sense in the context of Empire. In Jedi, it really struck me this time. I mean, I remember it. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten that part, but it's like Yoda and Obi-Wan both are saying you have to go kill Darth Vader, and that's our only hope, which makes no
Yes.
sense. They
No.
don't say why. What does it solve? Killing the Emperor maybe makes, but even then, it's like it's a really weird kind of construction. The Jedi is supposed to be this, you know. But again, they couldn't figure out how a Jedi could be a warrior and also not take the offensive. It doesn't really just make any sense to me.
Well, I
And
mean,
it
it was
never.
again, obviously inspired by, by martial arts,
Yes, 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 yes.
and, a lot of the philosophy, from the East about getting in tune with the universe and, and, I think then Yoda said, effectively, if you do that, then the superpowers will come, but the important accomplishment is to master yourself, get in tune with the universe, not focus on getting the superpowers. And
Right.
then I remember watching the movie and feeling very disappointed that,
Mhm.
as you said, having set up that if he were to leave early, bad things would happen, that
Mhm.
effectively nothing happened.
That's right. He lost his
And
hand.
yeah, we all knew he was going to fight Vader anyway, kind of
Yeah, yeah.
making that the ultimate test was, just kind of a cheap cop out, I thought.
I thought so too. It really, I mean, so this gets into a little bit of this balance, narrative balance that we keep kind of coming back to, and we both have our perspectives on this, which is how much should be explained and how much not be explained. But
Right.
also, I think more than that, how much does the author understand what they're claiming, right? And I think that part of what frustrates me is not that it wasn't fully explained, is that to me it's quite clear the author, whatever he wanted at the moment was what the rule was. And that
Hmm.
drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Try to be internally consistent with your own creation to some degree, even if you have to maybe figure it out sometimes. I'm not asking for perfect consistency, but it just doesn't. Because again, part of why Luke kind of wins is he gets really mad about the
Hmm.
sister thing and
Right.
wails on Darth Vader. Now, he stops before he kills him, which in some ways contradicts what Yoda told him
Hmm.
to do, which also doesn't make any sense. But I mean, he won because he got mad, but did not succumb to the dark side. It doesn't quite, just doesn't work the way that
No,
I
I,
would like
I
it to
I
work.
liked the way that they described the Force and Empire, and then, as you said, it all kind of unraveled and
Yeah, yeah, that's the
in
case.
Return of the Jedi.
So I think and this struck me as why I like Star Wars. I have a certain love, especially for these movies as a kid, and I can watch and enjoy Star Wars properties, but why it's not, if I'm rank ordering the properties, I just
Hmm.
it lacks it purports, this is the problem to me. Star Wars purports to have a very deep lore and a deep history, but it really doesn't take it seriously. It
No,
and it doesn't really, and part of it, to your point before, while Empire is this collaborative work, I think in some ways, especially if we go back to the prequels, which makes all this worse. But Lucas doesn't really take all that part of it seriously. He likes the trappings, like you say.
yeah,
It's the trappings from Eastern martial arts or from Kurosawa films or whatever the case might be, but he doesn't take it sufficiently seriously within his own creation.
right.
I don't think he ever did. I think, and that I think is what drives me a little crazy.
Yeah,
I also,
I would have much rather had him, start to succumb to the dark side and maybe sacrifice himself so
yeah,
that he
yeah, yeah,
wouldn't become a new Vader,
yes,
than what they did.
yeah. Or I mean, and I was trying to think, what is it that I wanted that I didn't get? I think I would have preferred a bigger escalation of the fight because again, this is when I get the political science brain. Like I don't entirely understand how the emperor dying like leads to total liberation of the entire empire at the end of the movie.
Oh, I bet you
And
saw that in my notes how much I agree
no,
with you on
I
that.
didn't actually see that. It just
Oh
I
yeah.
so
At the time, it's like, okay, you killed
yeah,
the Emperor, the Death
yeah.
Star's gone, Vader's gone, but there's a whole empire.
I mean, is this why our leaders think that if you kill the head of Al Qaeda or you take out the leader of a cartel, that it just in automatically they watch
Probably.
Return of the Jedi and they think that's the way it works? It's yeah, this sort of decapitation theory is maddening. I would have much preferred a much more significantly assault of Coruscant in that movie and maybe
Yeah.
taking out the core of the government and taking over the government. That'd be much more
Hmm.
interesting. But again, I don't know.
Well, they needed to end the movie, but
No,
they
I
could have
mean,
said, well, they're
instead of
broken.
blowing up
It's a
the Death
mopping
Star.
up operation now, or
Uh,
something though. But just, yeah,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, that always bothered me.
yeah. Let's see here.
But we're not yet to the other thing that really bothered me about this movie.
I will say that. Okay, well, go ahead. Go ahead. What is it that bothers you about this movie? Go
Well,
for
are
it.
we talking about the forest moon of Endor?
We could be.
Okay.
I was going that direction, so I'm. Let's
We're
let's do that.
okay, we're there. When I saw this movie for the first time,
Mhm.
I was so pissed off about the Ewoks. I was
Yeah,
so pissed off because
yeah,
it was obviously so much a merchandising play.
sure, sure,
It's
sure.
it's like the Paw Patrol toys today. It's just they were just ridiculous, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
The
yes.
battle there between the fuzzy bunnies and the Imperial stormtroopers just was absurd, and I was feeling that at the time. It's like, nice
Yes.
job on the makeup guys, but this makes no sense whatsoever.
Oh, look, it was already bad enough in the first two movies how bad of a shot the stormtroopers were and how
Yeah,
lousy their armor was. But now they're getting beat by teddy bears. How did these
right.
guys conquer the universe? I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I was, yeah,
they weren't
the
clever
whole,
guerrilla fighters. It was,
no.
you defeat somebody in body armor and a blaster with a log. It just
Sure. Or they smashed one of the AT-ATs with the logs. It's ridiculous.
right. It just again took
Um,
me totally out of the movie.
I agree. I agree. I wrote my notes too. That the whole that's part of the parts that I fast forwarded through, like the speeder chases, the speeder bikes, or whatever you call
Yeah,
them. Like I just Lucas has this fascination with things flying through like narrow spaces, but
right.
I didn't need that again.
Yeah, so like Empire was an incredibly paced movie about things you
Yes,
cared about.
that's right.
Uh, it, Return of the Jedi was not as well paced, and it was
No,
relying way too much on special effects. I mean, it was
yeah,
amazing, like zipping around near a
yeah,
forest like that,
yeah, yeah. It's
on
cool,
the
but
speeders. That was fun to watch, but it was just like a clip of something,
yeah, that's
not tied into the rest of the movie.
that. I guess kind of what I mean. It's like these series of set pieces
Yes.
that are stitched together. I mean, I agree. Like Empire, that's part of what compels is compelling about Empire. Really, every segment, every scene, there's these stakes for our characters
Hmm.
um, throughout the entire film. And this, it just didn't feel the same way. I mean, even I just thought about it right now. It struck me that scene, like Luke, like Vader knows Luke is there, and Luke just, we don't even see Luke turn himself in. All of a sudden, he's in the elevator. It's just like this sort of almost
Yeah.
anticlimactic. Here I am. I surrender. And then we go up to the. Now,
Hmm.
it was cool to see the Emperor. That was an interesting element of the story.
Yeah.
But so, but is there anything more about Endor you want to say? Because I'm gonna
I don't have a
kick
lot
up
more to
the.
say about Endor, to be honest.
Although that series of films has a bizarre fascination with moons.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I know the rumor was that Lucas wanted it to be Wookiees, which would have been much more interesting than
Oh,
Ewoks.
much. Yeah. Well, I'll say this about the moons. I mean, as an astronomy kid, I was always happy with what Star Wars did about the appearance of space.
Uh-huh.
Which was really striking. The planets, like in the first movie, like the Millennium Falcon, is flying in, and it's at a not the typical angle
Right,
that
right, right.
you would see. And if you wanted to say, okay, habitable balls of rock were moons of larger planets, that was kind of a cool astronomy thing
Sure.
to throw in. Maybe they did it one time too many, but it didn't bother me as much as other things.
I didn't bother me. It just always strikes me. Lots of moon, a lot of moon talk.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about, if you're prepared to do so,
Yeah.
the um the whole Vader Luke Emperor stuff.
Yeah, that was good.
We've already touched on
Yeah.
it. It was good. It was good. I enjoyed the Emperor's performance in particular. I think he was
Hmm.
sufficiently oily and evil.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and also good at kind of conveying that Luke was walking into a trap that he couldn't see. Like, ha ha
yes.
ha, you're doing everything that, I had hoped you would, so that you would go down the path of the dark side. You're really in over your head, and it's either a choice between being destroyed or joining us. I mean, that he did that well, and
No, he did. He
yeah.
did. Now, my gripe, and this is again my gripe about the film and really about some of the lore, I suppose, or
Hmm.
the broader arc of the story. I thought this in '83 when I saw the movie, but it's only grown over time. And when I watched this weekend, I'm like, it almost made me mad's too strong a term, but like Anakin's redemption makes no sense morally or really narratively in my mind.
Wow. Okay.
This
Fire
this
away.
I this idea that okay, so there's some good in you, Father, and that if we could just like blow on the embers of your goodness, this
Hmm.
would then transform you back into Anakin Skywalker after having been Darth Vader for, I guess, what, roughly 20 something years at this point. I mean, he's been uh, a terrible tyrant. He's overseen the destruction of the planets. He's massacred all the Jedi. He's done all these terrible things. And yet somehow, for reasons that really I don't find convincing in the film, because Luke is about to get killed, he's able to then become good. And then he's essentially, redeemed and goes
Yeah.
on to Jedi heaven at the end. It just doesn't track for me. It still doesn't track for me, and it just gets worse for me over time the more I think about it.
Yeah. Well, that whole kind of cliche about there's some good in you, or like when somebody's mind controlled, that
Yes, yes.
yeah, I know you're in there, that yeah, I remember at the time thinking, really, we didn't see any hint of this beforehand. So,
No, no, no.
the redemption based on what exactly? I mean, I thought maybe, thinking of this at the time, like the previous movie had ended with the appeal, we can rule the son, rule his father
Mhm,
and son together. That maybe that was like a little hint of some sort of paternal attachment to his
mhm.
offspring, that it wasn't just some sort of rando who happened to, have superpowers, but it wasn't enough by far. Not nearly enough.
No, yeah, it just the depths of his evil in this movie. These movies are about stark good and evil, at least
Hmm.
in the language that they use. They just the part that I believed, how about this? I believe that Luke might think this is true or want it to be true or want a
Hmm.
connection to his father. Although by the same token, um, if you've seen your father be this evil,
Yeah.
maybe you don't want to kind of go play catch.
Right.
It's I just maybe you
Yes.
don't want to do that. And so
Hmm.
I mean, part of it, and I wrote down, I'm not even sure it makes sense. And I mentioned it previous before, but it's almost like in some ways it is serial logic. Like we need to do something dramatic on screen. Don't think about it too much.
Yes.
And we're gonna, it's a morality play, and he was bad, but then he made a choice, he became good, and then what else do you really want to know, man? And
Yeah.
that's fine. And again, but and again, I'm maybe taking the narrative too seriously, but it just it really continues to strike me that there really is no reason why Darth Vader deserves to be redeemed
No.
at all, and yet he is.
Right. No, I agree.
But
And since we're talking about our memories, at the time, it just seemed a bit forced
yes,
when I
oh
when
yeah,
I first
no,
saw it.
no pun
Yeah.
intended.
Yeah. Ha ha ha.
So anyway, yeah, I will, and this is no, I mean, again, it's not a. I'm ragging on it. I would rank it below other Star Wars movies, and really it is to me a much lesser
Yes.
of the trilogy.
Yeah.
It's and I have at least one acquaintance. I don't know someone I've known online for a very long time. This is his favorite movie. I think because he likes
Hmm.
the redemption part. Um, but uh, but it is, I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me. And this reinforced my feeling that it's just inferior to the other two films.
It is.
And in some ways foreshadows, I think, some of the weakness of subsequent films in my
Right.
mind.
Right. Yeah. It added things, as we said,
Yes.
when Empire came out, there were new places, new aliens, new ships, new this, new that. But as a story, it just didn't hold together
Yeah.
the way that Empire did,
I,
or the
not
original
not
Star Wars did.
not to go too far down this path, but I did pay attention because we talked about Londo, whom I like the character very much, and as I understand at least the sort of the lore of the day, that was partially in response to the criticism that the first movie was incredibly white.
Okay.
Um, but the reality is, if you watch Empire and Jedi, it's still pretty incredibly white. I found one, paying attention, there was one pilot who might have been of Asian or something descent, and one
Yeah.
black pilot who got blown up. That was it. It's still a pretty white galaxy.
Pretty
For
whitey
whatever
white
that's
out there.
worth, it's just, I don't know. It
Yeah.
just sort of struck me. It's sort of funny that
So it
they
was nice to
felt the need
see.
to respond, but
Yeah.
only very limited fashion.
Sorry, I talked over you there.
That's
I
right.
was just gonna say that I did appreciate seeing more aliens in
Hmm.
positions of responsibility.
Yes, yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Good
All
old
right.
Admiral Akbar.
I'm not gonna say
Anyway,
it. We're all
I know
thinking we're all thinking the
we're
line, but
both
we're not
thinking
gonna
it.
say it.
We're not gonna
Not
say it.
gonna. We're gonna keep our trap shut. Oh God, I did it.
You fell into it.
I fell into it. Okay.
Oh dear.
All right.
Okay.
Shall we
I
wrap
I
up a little
think
bit?
that brings us to the end, right? Oh well, I wrote
I haven't done my
down
CGI rant yet.
Oh yeah, you have a CGI rant. We gotta go Grumpy Geeks, so
Grumpy
go.
Geeks. So we talked about how just wonderfully uh, designed and executed all the practical effects were. And I would also include the stop motion effects
Yes,
in these
yes.
movies were pretty stellar. Um, when watching Return of the Jedi and seeing that CGI singer in Jabba's palace,
Mm,
it just embodied everything about, let's say, cheap CGI to me. That
mm,
you want Star Wars to be special, right?
mm-hmm.
You want any movie you see to be special. And this just seemed like slop. And it wasn't a good song. It was just sort of stuck in
Oh
there.
no.
It was sort of just bad in a way that really was kind of shocking, since I again haven't seen this movie in a long time, and I knew that wasn't there. And now just like this reflex in Hollywood, like everything has to be CGI. It's the way to go to do special effects. Say, go watch Empire Strikes Back and ask yourself, if you had a big budget, instead of spending it on reshoots, and cheap ass CGI, why not do some great practical effects that look right?
Right,
That
right, right.
that it looks like a forest, that it looks like a monster, waddling along someplace. That it isn't something that's so obviously computer generated, and then
No, I think that's fair.
you'll have the movie magic that I would think you'd want to create if you're not just a crap artist, trying to cash in a paycheck.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
There's your grumpy geek rant for the
I
episode.
feel so much better.
That's
All
good.
right, the merch. You
That is
you
good.
you
I
said
was
about the
going to
merch?
mention merch. I'm not sure there's anything else to say this week that we didn't say last week about merch,
No,
but I
not
was
at
going to give you
all.
the
Not at
opportunity
all.
just in case.
Yeah, and I was in
Very,
college then, so as I said, I was, 1980. I was just finishing high school. 83, I was in college, so I wasn't really buying those sorts of things at the time, and there wasn't anything new that came out that really kind of struck my fancy that I would have liked to have.
yeah, I don't. It was I was like early high school, so I wasn't as interested in that kind of stuff at the time myself. So yeah, I don't recall anything either. Well,
Yeah,
very good. I think that brings us to the close of this week's episode of Ancient Geeks. We hope to see you next
fabulous.
time.
We'll see you then.
Adios.
That's the epic conclusion of episode 10 of Ancient Geeks. Thanks for listening. You can find us on the podcast platform of your choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever else you like using. Please subscribe. We're always grateful for a review on the podcast app that you use. Reviews help people find us. And more importantly, tell a friend if you like what you hear here. If you have words for us, kind or otherwise, contact us directly at someancientgeeks@gmail.com. Look for us on Facebook, Blue Sky, Reddit, and other social media outlets. All content copyright 2025, Tom Grant and Stephen Taylor. Music by Reversed Image, whom you can find on Pixabay. See you next time when we talk about Dungeons and Dragons.